About 3 million Australians have been affected by this summer's bushfire crisis. And about half of Australians were affected by smoke that drifted across where they lived or where they worked. Maybe you are one of them. Were you moved to compassion by the crisis? Did you give? Where did that money go? It's great to have you on Signs Trending this week. We'd love you to like our Facebook page, or even better, join the closed group and get chatting. Well, we've been talking about these bushfires and I keep hearing the word unprecedented. Look, I should introduce the panel. With us, we have Ashley Stanton and Robert Patton from the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, or ADRA, and my fantastically good-looking co-host, Mr. Daniel Kubrick. Yes. Unprecedented, Daniel.
Yeah, unprecedentedly good-looking. Anyway, so this these bushfires, they have been called unprecedented. I just want to shoot a few numbers out there. 25.5 million hectares, 33 people are considered deceased now. There's more that are missing, 3,000 homes destroyed or damaged.
Horrific.
1 billion mammals have actually been reported dead, 25,000 koalas on Kangaroo Island.
And there's a whole list, I think, of 113 species now that are considered to be, have moved up towards the endangered end of the list, which is kind of scary.
Yeah, I think in the history of Australia, this is probably up there in the top 3. Two of the biggest ones were Ash Wednesday, I think, and Black Saturday. Black Saturday was a more recent one that happened in Victoria. That brings us to sort of what the response has been, because in the past weekend, there was a massive concert on for 75,000 people in Sydney in ANZ Stadium called Firefight Australia. They raised $10 million. $10 million, so like a huge amount of money that is obviously going to be put to good use.
And this is on top of the other money that was given to the Red Cross, to the Salvos, to Vinnie's. Did ADRA also run an emergency or bushfire appeal?
Yeah, so we have actually had a specific appeal for this particular response. It seems that anyone who is well placed to respond in Australia to this disaster, in whatever their capacity, has been actively involved. And so we also have seen unprecedented levels of donations.
That's good to hear. However, there have been a few issues that people have taken with this whole situation. Obviously, lots of money was being raised while the bushfires were, at their peak. They were raging, and now that sort of things have calmed down, people are starting to question where that money has gone. There's been reports in the media that, for particularly Celeste Barber raised $51 million on Facebook, and now there's a sort of a legal battle going on because that money is going to the RFS, and they have rules about how they can allocate that money. And so,
but she told people that money was going to be going to families who were affected by the bushfires, and it turns out that legally it possibly can't go to them. It's got to be used for training for the RFS. And is that the sort of thing that charities and aid organisations can get stuck with, not communicating the message clearly?
I think there's got to be great care in actually what is communicated, because at the end of the day, those organisations have to be accountable for the funding that they receive, what they do with it, and they should be reporting back to the people who actually donated that funding.
What happens if you put an appeal out there and people just respond with incredibly warm hearts and actually give you more than you need? What do you give it back?
I mean, the key thing is that as much as possible, that money should be applied to that disaster that has actually happened, because that's what your advertising was for.
But that means you really need to include the information at the very top. If we receive more than we actually need, it'll go to other similar disasters or things coming up. People need to understand that from the word go, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And look, I don't work in the marketing area, but I do know that a lot of organisations, might be at the bottom, has a little sort of thing saying, if this is oversubscribed or whatever term they might use, then this will be used for another disaster.
So that just ties back to the situation with the Red Cross, who have received $115 million in donations. They've already said that 10% of that is going to go towards marketing. So is that a normal, Ash, is that a normal amount of money? Do you think 10%?
10% just towards marketing?
10%, it depends on whether it's actually going towards marketing or what we call general admin
Is it
costs.
marketing and
I
administration?
think it's marketing and administration.
Yeah.
So
That's
like
what I thought,
fuel
yeah.
costs, stuff like that.
That is actually a very good percentage. So
Okay.
it is generally accepted that people want to be operating around an 80-20 split. So to be able to do a 90-10 split is actually fantastic. And I think we've come from a culture, charities were born from volunteers. But when things get bigger, you obviously need people who are going to be there full time. You need people to be running these operations, and the bigger they get, the bigger your costs get, but the more money you can raise. So it's a very fine balance that you have to have here. And for the Red Cross to be acknowledging straight up that yes, these are our admin costs is completely within their right and their need.
But
So
we had a politician, was Andrew Constance,
Yes.
Yeah.
a politician who was there on the ground, seeing people living in caravans, living in tents, living in showgrounds, and he's saying, Australians are donating millions of dollars to your Red Cross, and these people are still here. What are you doing with that money? Why don't you, what do you say, pull your finger out and, you know, get busy, get this sorted out, get these people like into more suitable accommodation?
That wasn't actually Andrew Constance that said that. That was the New South Wales Emergency Services Minister, David Elliott. He actually said, quote unquote, "My message to charities is to pull your finger out. This is not the time for delay, particularly while people are hurting so much." You guys are like at the front line here. You know how things work logistically. Does he just
is that a
not-
fair comment?
Is that a fair comment, or is he just
To push them?
misinformed,
Come on,
you know?
the money's here now, the need is here now, let's match it up, let's get
Hey,
this
I
party
don't
started.
think there's anything wrong with actually, you know, holding organisations accountable and actually, if you like, pushing them somewhat. I mean, there are people in need, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that money is going out to them. So, yeah, I think it's always good to actually push the boundaries somewhat, especially in the event of an emergency like this where people are suffering.
The interesting thing I found is that the Red Cross also said, yes, some of this money is going to be used for immediate disaster relief, but we also need to be aware that there's a recovery period after this. Does that sort of square with what your experience is with
100%.
ADRA?
So this is sort of, Robert can definitely speak to this, but this is sort of the education piece that is necessary for the general public to understand about disasters. It is not as quick as just throwing money at someone and the problem is solved. The recovery process will actually take years. And so it would actually be unfair on communities for us to spend all of the money that has been raised, all of the $1 million, immediately right now, because you're not looking to the future. You're not looking at how do you repair complete livelihoods or farms that have been destroyed. That does not happen overnight.
When it comes to giving donations, I mean, it's that immediate disaster relief that is sort of the sexy end, isn't it? Of that, that's where people will get, you know, they will get excited. Their hearts will be moved. They will donate generously. But it's hard sometimes, isn't it, to raise money for those more long-term development recovery activities?
It is. I mean, the reality is when something is happening and it's in the media every day, people want to give. You've already seen there's been a drop-off in the reporting of what's been happening, with the fires, the bushfires, and that, and the impact on people. And as time goes, it drops off very quickly, and people, we're moved on to something else, and people are giving their money somewhere else. You need to use, I believe, the money wisely that is given, looking at the longer term. There are ways of managing this where there is a big push for early recovery. And I think, there is that immediate life-saving response, but then there needs to be the funding that goes into that early recovery that builds a firm foundation for that longer term, knowing that there may not be money, down the track further.
I guess one thing that I'm aware of in terms of that longer effect, I mean, I've, was evacuated during the South Coast bushfires. You were down there too. You saw the results. Yeah. You come back to work after your so-called holidays, and you're still sort of struggling with it. A lot of people are dealing with depression and that sort of stuff. And when you have floods on top of that, and then you have coronavirus on top of that, you start wondering what is going on, on this planet. Is there any hope? Is there anything I can depend on? And for me, I guess I really understand how people, will turn to their faith in times like this. They'll say there's nothing that we can really rely on in terms of, in the end, in terms of the here and now. We actually have to have a higher purpose and a higher meaning, and I get that, and I think that's really valuable. Hey, thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Hey, we'd love to hear your views, so please, jump on the Facebook group. We'd love to see you on Signs Trending on the page there. Join the closed group so we can, talk in a safe space and get some of these issues sorted out. Thanks for your time. We'll see you next week.